What is pollination? By Bobbie Kalman. What is pollination? By Bobbie Kalman. Contents. What is pollen? What is pollination? Types of pollination. Shapes and colors. Do we need pollinators? Insect pollinators. Bees are best. Butterflies and moths. Wasps and flies. Beetle pollinators. Bird pollinators. Lizards, bats, possums. Pollinators in danger. Helping pollinators. Glossary and index. What is pollen? Pollen is the yellow, white, or brown powder at the center of most flowers. Pollen is an important food for bees and some other animals. The bee on the left is covered in pollen. Bees collect pollen in pollen sacs. An important part of flowers. Pollen is a very important part of many flowers. It is the part of a flower that plants need to make fruit, seeds, and new plants. To make new plants, pollen has to move from one flower part to another of the same kind of flower. Most flowers need pollinators to move their pollen. Pollinators are animals such as bees, wasps, butterflies, and other small animals that visit flowers. This beetle has pollen all over its body. When it goes to another flower of the same kind, it will leave pollen on that flower. The flower will then be able to make seeds. What is pollination? Some flowers have male and female parts. The stamen is the male part of the plant that makes pollen. Some flowers have one stamen and others have many. The pistil is the female part of the flower. It is made up of the style, stigma, and ovary. The stigma is the top part. It receives the pollen. The style is the pollen tube. The pollen travels down through the style to the ovary. The ovary contains ovules. How a plant grows. When pollen moves from a stamen to a stigma, pollination has taken place. After a flower is pollinated, its petals fall off. The ovaries of the flowers become fruit, and the ovules become seeds. The fruit of a plant can be a vegetable or nut, as well as fruit. The fruit of the bean plant below are the bean pods. The seeds are the beans inside the pods. Bees are pollinating the flowers of a bean plant. After pollination, the ovaries of the flowers become bean pods. The beans inside are the seeds that can make new plants. Types of pollination. Flowers cannot make seeds unless they are pollinated. There are three main types of pollination: cross-pollination, self-pollination, and wind pollination. In cross-pollination, flowers need pollen from other flowers of the same species or type to land on their pistils. Animals such as insects and birds carry pollen from flower to flower. This bee is cross-pollinating. It is carrying pollen from one flower to another of the same kind. Self-pollination. During self-pollination, pollen moves from the stamen to the pistil of the same flower. Flowers that self-pollinate have male and female parts that are close together, so the pollen can move easily from the stamen to the pistil. Sunflowers can self-pollinate or be cross-pollinated. Wind pollination. Some flowers are pollinated by the wind. Wind sweeps pollen off those flowers and carries it to other flowers. Wind-pollinated flowers have millions of tiny pollen grains. These flowers seldom have nectar. Ragweed flowers are wind-pollinated. Many people are very allergic to ragweed pollen. Shapes and colors. Most animals pollinate when they look for nectar. Nectar is a liquid found in many flowers. The bright colors and sweet smell of a flower tells pollinators that the flower contains nectar or pollen for them to eat. Flowers that are pollinated at night have very strong scents to make it easier for pollinators to find them. The Luna moth is a beautiful nighttime pollinator. Orchids have special markings that guide insects to their nectar. A paper kite butterfly is pollinating an orchid. The jack-in-the-pulpit plant does not smell sweet. In fact, it smells like dead meat. The plant attracts flies to pollinate it. Hummingbirds have long beaks and very long tongues. They are able to feed at flowers that are too deep or thin for other pollinators to reach. Do we need pollinators? Did you know that more than 1/3 of the food you eat depends on pollinators? Pollinators make plants healthier so they can make a lot of food. There are thousands of kinds of pollinators. Most vegetables, fruits, and nuts come from plants that were pollinated by insects, birds, bats, and other small animals. All these foods. The foods shown on this page and many more came from plants that were pollinated by insects and other animals. Insect pollinators. There are thousands of kinds of insects that pollinate plants. They belong to 5 main groups: bees, wasps, butterflies and moths, flies, and beetles. Without these insects, we would not have many of the foods we eat. Wasps, moth, butterfly, flies, beetles, bees. Bees are best. There are thousands of kinds of bees, but the honeybee is the most important pollinator. Honeybees are social insects. Social insects live together in groups called colonies. Each bee colony lives in a hive, which is its home. Bees collect nectar and pollen from flowers. They pollinate many kinds of fruit trees as well as vegetable plants. They also make honey, which people eat. Bee on an apple tree. Bumblebees. The bumblebee is another kind of pollinator. There are about 250 species of bumblebees. Bumblebees have big furry bodies. Like honeybees, these bees live in colonies of 150 to 200 bees. Bumblebees make their nests underground. The tongues of some bumblebees are short and others are long. The long-tongued bees are important pollinators of many plants such as beans, tomatoes, and clover. Butterflies and moths. Butterflies and moths have long proboscises, or mouth parts, which can reach the nectar and pollen inside flowers. Butterflies like bright pink, blue, and purple flowers. Some moths are good pollinators of flowers that bloom at night. They look for pale flowers with strong scents. The hummingbird moth can pollinate flowers that are too thin and deep for other pollinators. Its long proboscis can reach the pollen deep inside them. There's the proboscis. This butterfly has landed on a pink flower. It is using its long proboscis to sip the nectar. Its legs are covered with pollen. The proboscis. Wasps and flies. Wasps are mainly carnivores. Carnivores eat other animals. Wasps hunt small insects. Many insects live on plants. Wasps visit flowers to look for smaller insects that they can find there. They also drink flower nectar to give them the energy to hunt insects. While they hunt insects, wasps pollinate plants by carrying pollen on their bodies from flower to flower. Wasps also help nature by eating many insects that damage plants. Hoverfly. Pretending to sting. Flies are very important pollinators because there are so many of them. The most important fly pollinators are hoverflies and bee flies, but many other flies also visit flowers to feed on nectar. Hoverflies have yellow and black stripes, but they are not related to bees or wasps. The flies, which cannot sting, pretend to be stinging insects to keep other animals from eating them. Beetle pollinators. Beetles visit flowers for many reasons. Some eat the pollen and nectar in flowers, and some eat the whole flowers. Other beetles feed on the smaller insects that visit flowers. Smooth or hairy. Beetles that are smooth are not the best pollinators because pollen slides off their bodies. The best beetle pollinators are those with hairy bodies because the pollen sticks to their hairs as they travel from flower to flower. Ladybugs are beetles that feed on small pests such as aphids. Aphids damage plants. Ladybugs also drink some nectar as a snack to give them energy. Bird pollinators. There are more than 2,000 kinds of birds around the world that feed on nectar or insects found in flowers. Birds are important pollinators. In North America, hummingbirds pollinate many kinds of wildflowers, especially those with trumpet shapes. Honey eaters are pollinators in Australia and on many islands in the Pacific Ocean. Honey creepers pollinate wildflowers in Mexico and South America. When a hummingbird puts its long beak into a flower to drink the nectar, sticky pollen grains cling to its beak. Some of the pollen grains are then left at the next flower it visits. Hummingbirds have very good eyes and are attracted to red flowers. Both the red-legged creeper and the green honey creeper have curved bills that can reach inside flowers to eat nectar and catch insects. Many Australian flowers, such as this red hot poker, are pollinated by honey eaters. The flower is a kind of lily. Lizards, bats, possums. Animals that hunt insects often pollinate plants. Small lizards visit flowers to find insects to eat. When they visit a flower, pollen sticks to their bodies. Other animal pollinators include fruit bats and honey possums. Both eat nectar and pollen. The honey possum is one of the few mammals that eat mainly nectar and pollen. Its long snout and tongue reach the nectar and pollen inside flowers. Besides eating fruit, fruit bats visit flowers in the dark to eat nectar and pollen. This green anole is looking for insects on these pink flowers. Pollinators in danger. Pollinators are very important to us. Without them, we would not have fruits, vegetables, nuts, honey, or chocolate. These important animals are disappearing from Earth. When people build in wilderness areas, animals lose their homes and their food. Pesticides and diseases are also killing many pollinating insects. As we lose our pollinating insects, we also lose our food supply. One of the most important pollinators, honeybees, are disappearing, and no one really knows why. Fewer bees. Each year, there are fewer honeybees. The use of pesticides has killed many bees. Bees are also being killed off by two types of mites that have moved into honeybee hives. The bee on the right has mites on its body. Ooh. The varroa mite attaches itself to a bee and feeds on fluids from the bee's body. The bee on the right has been treated for mites with powdered sugar. The sugar causes the mites to fall off the bees. Helping pollinators. The best way to help pollinators is by telling everyone about why they're so important to us. Most people may think that bees, wasps, flies, and beetles and moths are pests. You and your friends can design posters to hang in your school and community to let people know that our food supply depends on these helpful animals. What other ways can you help? You can ask your parents to grow native flowers around your home. Pollinators need flowers. Thank you, pollinators. Each time you bite into an apple, pear, or vegetable, say a silent thank you to the pollinators that made it possible. Count the number of times you say thanks in a day, and you will see just how important pollinators are to you and everyone who eats. Plant a vegetable garden. If you do not have a yard, you can plant vegetables in pots on a balcony. Bees and butterflies will love them, and you will love eating the delicious and healthy fresh foods. Glossary. Note, Some bold-faced words are defined where they appear in the book. Allergic, describing a person who reacts negatively to a substance such as dust, pollen, or certain foods. Carnivore, an animal that eats other animals. Disease, something that makes a living thing sick. Hive, the home of a bee colony. Mammal, a warm-blooded animal that gives birth to live young. Mite, a small animal that lives and feeds off other animals or plants. Native, an animal or plant that is found in a certain place or area. Nectar, a sweet liquid found in flowers. Pesticide, a chemical sprayed on plants to kill insects. Pollen, a powdery substance found in flowers that is needed to make fruit, seeds, and new plants. Scent, a pleasant smell. Species, a group of related living things that can have babies together. Wilderness, a place in nature where no people live. Index. That's the end, my friends, of What is Pollination by Bobbie Kalman. Bye.